and share your thoughts as we go along. And I hope this session will be both informative and interactive. Nelson, could you please go ahead to share my slides? Or you were hoping that I share on my side?
Lisa, I was hoping you would share your slides if you don't mind.
Perfect. It's all right. I'll go right ahead then. Oh, Nelson, I've requested to share. You have to give me permission to share the slides.
Please share.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right. So my content, I'll cover a brief overview of carbon markets, its evolution, Uganda's experience in it. I'll share on Uganda's nationally determined contribution, our current carbon market guiding frameworks, Article 6 readiness in Uganda, then I'll conclude with the way forward. So carbon market is a system where carbon emissions are monetized, and there are two types. The voluntary carbon market is unregulated, meaning countries, companies, or businesses choose to voluntarily reduce their emissions, maybe for purposes of social corporate responsibility or achieving environmental goals. Whereas for the case of the compliance markets, it's regulated, implying countries, companies, or entities must adhere to legally binding emission reduction targets. So how do these carbon markets work? How do these carbon markets work? Firstly, it's through a cap and trade system which puts a limit on the amount of greenhouse gases that is to be emitted. This works specifically for industries. And a good example of a cap and trade system is the European Union emissions trading scheme. Secondly, carbon markets work through carbon offsets, where projects can be implemented that can reduce or remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And lastly, through carbon credits. These are tradable certificates that give you a right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Below my slide here are examples of carbon crediting programs. These programs are crucial in that from the carbon crediting cycle of a program, they're responsible for registration of your project, to monitoring of the carbon project, and then to the verification of the carbon credit. So what are the global climate change frameworks in place currently for us to meet our climate goals? The United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change of 1992 basically focused on stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate atmosphere. Secondly, we have the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. This protocol was the first legally binding treaty under the UNFCCC, and it was the first time countries by then thought of or came together to decide to reduce emissions. The Kyoto Protocol operated with three mechanisms. The first was the clean development mechanism, which allowed industrialized countries to implement emission reduction projects in developing countries. And in return, they would get back what is called certified emission reductions, which they would use to account to their country-specific set targets. Another mechanism was called the joint implementation. The joint implementation allowed industrialized countries to implement emission reduction projects in developed countries, and it also covered emissions trading by then. After the Kyoto Protocol, we transitioned to the Paris Agreement in 2015, which called for increasing global mitigation efforts to keep global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius or even well below 2 degrees Celsius. So how have these carbon markets been evolving? Carbon markets emerged in the late 1990s and have been evolving via a learning by doing basis ever since then to cater for shortcomings and specific needs. By the late 1990s, countries did not have overall mitigation ambition. It was only a few countries that had targets by then. And the compliance market that was in existence by then operated under those targets, but the voluntary carbon markets operated basing on the context of reducing emissions. But until now, by up to 2021, all countries now have targets, which is triggering a lively debate to see if the voluntary carbon market can fully contribute to reducing emissions in this new Paris Agreement era. But to note, though, stakeholders, ever since the emergence of carbon markets, have raised concerns on the social and environment integrity of these credits and their use, and also on how the market mechanisms were developed. So the Paris Agreement of 2015 replaced the Kyoto Protocol with a broader focus of participation. If you realize right now, we are still on a trajectory to reach net zero by 2050. And we are already in 2025, where parties or countries must now communicate new or update their nationally determined contributions before we reach the next global stocktake of 2028, as the road leads ahead to also us reaching our Sustainable Development Goals 2030. So what has been Uganda's experience in these carbon markets? Under the Clean Development Mechanism, Uganda registered a total of 189 activities. 19 of them were project activities and 8 were programs of activities. Under the CDM, project activities implied standalone projects that were implemented in an individual country, whereas program of activities was the same project implemented in a couple of countries. And for Uganda's case, our project activities were in the major sectors of hydro reforestation, whereas our program of activities that we shared with other countries focused on cook stoves, water purification, landfill composting, and energy distribution. So at the end of 2024, projects under the CDM were required to request to transition to Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, and these are some of our projects that requested for transition to Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement and successfully transitioned. Under the voluntary carbon market, Uganda has a total of 91 registered voluntary carbon market activities that have issued over 14 million credits. And most of our projects were registered under the gold standard. And the major areas of focus were still energy, cook stoves, and on forestry. We add others with Vera and the standards of Plan Vivo. So Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Article 6 under the Paris Agreement provides for countries to voluntarily cooperate with each other to reduce their emissions. Under Article 6.2, countries can voluntarily enter into bilateral cooperation with each other. And in this case, country A can fund a renewable energy project in country B, and after them funding that project, these emission reductions are measured, verified, and then transferred back to country A. And at the end of the day, country A can use these emission reductions to achieve their mitigation target in their nationally determined contribution. So Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement involves transfer of what we call internationally transferable mitigation outcomes. It means if Uganda, for example, enters a 6.2 agreement with Sweden, Sweden will invest, let's say, for example, in a renewable energy project in Uganda, and at the end of the day, Uganda will have to transfer back internationally transferable mitigation outcomes to Sweden, which Sweden will use to account for their mitigation target within their nationally determined contribution. Article 6.4 looks at emission reduction, but with a central observe of the UNFCCC. Under Article 6.2, it's voluntary, it's not regulated, but 6.4 of the Paris Agreement is regulated. And as I said earlier, 6.4 currently has all the clean development mechanism projects that successfully transitioned. Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement provides for non-market approaches for climate action, meaning here there will be no transfer of mitigation outcomes. Article 6.8, its overall purpose looks at promoting or ensuring global sustainable development. So where do emissions come from? Emissions arise from the greenhouse gas major emitting sectors of agriculture, forestry and land use, energy and transport, waste, then also from industrial processes and product use. Article 4 of the Paris Agreement focuses on nationally determined contributions, where countries or parties must communicate their national climate action plan every 5 years, and also provides a path towards us achieving net zero. On Uganda's nationally determined contribution, during our update process, a projection analysis was done, which showed that emissions will continue to rise from all major emitting sectors, ranging from agriculture, forestry, energy, transport, and waste. If we do nothing, if we continue operating on a full economy-wide target, and we do nothing about these emissions will continue to arise from all these major sectors. So Uganda's mitigation target under the nationally determined contribution is 24.7% below business as usual by 2030. And the financial requirement required for Uganda to achieve this target is costed at 28.1 billion US dollars. And of this 28.1 billion, 85% of it is conditional, meaning the country expects this amount to come from external funding, while 15% is conditional, meaning the government will cover emission reduction with that amount of money. So this table represents the absolute mitigation reductions across different sectors. And we realize that the highest potential of greenhouse gas emission reduction is from the agriculture, forestry, and other land use. For Uganda to be able to achieve this target, we need to ensure that different line ministries respond to climate responsive budgeting in our budget framework papers, and we need to ensure that we do climate change tagging, where the money of funds needed for mitigation and adaptation are clearly earmarked. So this is the overall potential expected from all different sectors, but the highest is from the agriculture, forestry, and land use. And from this table, we realize that for Uganda to also achieve this target, for us to achieve our 24.7 mitigation emission reduction target, we also indicated that we will explore carbon markets to be able to get this finance to achieve this target. Also, during the nationally determined contribution update process, a vulnerability and risk assessment was carried out and it will reveal that some sectors are at more risk compared to others. The agriculture sector, water, fisheries were identified, and ecosystems were identified to be at most risk. And to this end, we are in the process of developing national adaptation plans for the different sectors so that we are able to respond effectively and in time to be able to meet these disasters. For now, the national adaptation plans that are ready for Uganda, we have the Health National Adaptation Plan and the Agricultural National Adaptation Plan is also ready. What are those guiding frameworks that are currently in place for the carbon market to be able to operate well in the country? The National Climate Change Policy of 2015 paved a pathway towards a climate resilient and low carbon development. And by then, it was envisioned to attract international sources of funding from carbon markets and even the REDD+. This national climate change policy by then provided a policy response for REDD+, and it also took note of the compliance markets and the voluntary carbon markets that were already operating in the country by then, and also noted that there were no regulations by then to guide the country on how to operate the carbon market. The National Forestry and Tree Planting Regulation of 2016 also provided for trade in carbon sequestration credits, specifically under regulation. Okay. The National Forestry and Tree Planting Regulation provided for trade in carbon sequestration credits and also provided for a responsible body to observe carbon market activities. By then, the Climate Change Unit. We came on to the National Climate Change Act of 2021. The National Climate Change Act gave a force of law of the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol to operate in Uganda. Section 9 of this act specifically provides for climate change mechanisms or carbon markets. And the climate change mechanisms that were provided for compliance, voluntary carbon market, non-market approaches or cooperative approaches referred to in Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And it also noted any other climate change mechanism as may be prescribed by the regulations. And Uganda, to this end, guided by the National Climate Change Act, our regulations are underway to monitor the participation of a project proponent in the carbon market. And at the start of January this year, the regulations were gazetted, and during the East Africa Carbon Markets Forum, our Honorable Minister was able to announce that the regulations to guide the carbon market framework were soon to be finalized after the minister endorses. So what is the role of governments in these carbon markets? Firstly, it's to establish regulatory frameworks to facilitate voluntary carbon markets and compliance markets. Governments need these regulations to guide on how carbon markets will operate within their jurisdictions. Another role is the appointment of a designated national authority. A designated national authority is responsible for overseeing carbon market activities or projects in a country. They are responsible for also approving those projects and ensuring the country is in line to meet their climate goals and the nationally determined contribution. Establishment of national registries. National registries are very important in the carbon market, in more so under Article 6.2, to ensure there is transparency and accountability. Because if Uganda, for example, transfers internationally transferable mitigation outcomes, for example, to Sweden, we should be able to have a registry where we fully account so that we don't do double counting too on our end. Government is responsible too for capacity building and stakeholder engagement. With the carbon market, you realize from the designated national authority, the capacity of staff should be built to ensure they are able to guide on the most suitable projects for the country that the country can do under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Government is also responsible for development of a framework for benefit sharing. And they should ensure that this framework is equitable in that all parties are able to fully benefit at the end of the day. Not like the communities where the projects are being implemented feel left out and dissatisfied. Another role of government is to ensure ambition in climate goals. By governments participating in this carbon market space, they in return encourage private sector investment and engagement. So there are specific requirements needed for a country to be ready to participate under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. A country requires national laws and policies. And for Uganda's case, we already have the National Climate Change Policy in place and the National Climate Change Act. We need regulations and guidelines. Our regulations are almost about to be endorsed, and it will cover parts ranging from how emissions should be measured, registration of validators and verifiers, how these carbon market projects will be approved. It will also look at transfer of verified carbon credits and also cover ownership and benefit sharing. So these draft regulations are underway and will soon be endorsed by the minister. A country requires a national registry and database. For Uganda's case, we do not have a national registry that has yet been developed, but we hope to use the international registry under the UNFCCC Secretariat as we develop ours. A country requires a functional national greenhouse gas inventory and management system. Currently, we already have an inventory in place, and we recently submitted our last biannual update report in preparation to start doing the biannual transparency reports to the UNFCCC this year. So we also need sectoral standardized baselines and emission factors. For now, Uganda has only the forest reference level, which captures emission factors in forest degradation, but we hope to get emission factors for all other sectors ranging from energy, transport, and the rest. Another requirement is capacity building for sectoral focal points, committees, and even the designated national authority in carbon trading processes. For now, different partners have been supporting the department to build capacity of the different staff in these carbon markets. So the way forward currently for Uganda is for us to operationalize our carbon market regulations and guidelines, create awareness on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement for government officials at all levels and also non-state actors. We also need to start initiating and entering bilateral cooperation agreements under Article 6.2 with other countries. We need to develop sectoral baselines and emission factors and continuously build the capacity of our staff in the carbon market space. So in conclusion, governments must take caution as they move forward in implementing this Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. Focus should be placed on benefit sharing to ensure that there is equity in the carbon market space and to ensure that there is equity in the carbon market space and to ensure that the carbon markets contribute effectively to provide the much needed climate finance for African governments to move mitigation and adaptation efforts. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that incredible presentation and highlights you've put to us. I sincerely want to thank you for making it to this meeting. For colleagues to know is that where Lisa now is, it's about 11 p.m. towards midnight. So it's a big thank you for her to making it a point to come and speak to us. Well, Lisa has tried to explain even deeper than we expected her to. So that is a complete credit. One thing I would like to remind our participants is that this is a learning series, and in subsequent series, we'll be looking deeper at voluntary carbon markets, then like how projects developed from development up to verification. We shall have people from Vera, Plan Vivo, and Gold Standard to speak to us. So some of the questions that you have for Lisa, I'm convinced that they would better be answered during the subsequent sessions. But not being limited by that, before Mwesigwa comes to ask his question, I see the hand up. Allow me read for Lisa these few questions that I think she should attempt to respond to. Musime Posiano has a question, is asking that have the regulations, carbon market regulations been finalized? Then another one, this is Patricia. She's wondering whether carbon market is same as carbon credit. And she's saying, if not, then we should attempt to clarify the difference. Lisa, I don't want to burden you with a million questions. You could respond to those, then we select other few questions. You answer them as we give Mwesigwa a space to have his question put forward.
All right. Thank you so much, Nelson. So I'll go right ahead. The regulations have not yet been finalized, but at the start of January this year, they were gazetted, meaning they're about to be endorsed by the minister. They're about to be signed. And we are hoping in a few months' time, the market will be regulated. Someone asked the difference between the carbon market and carbon credit. These are two different things. A carbon market is a system where carbon emissions are bought and sold, while a carbon credit is a tradable certificate that gives you a right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. So carbon credits are generated from carbon markets. The market is where these credits are bought and sold.
Thank you, Lisa, for the clarifications. Someone is asking that what procedure can an organization supporting farmers? I think that will be answered in the subsequent session,
Okay.
where we'll be looking at project development. Then for carbon projects registered under gold standards but are selling their carbon credits outside Uganda carbon markets, is there international determined policy under Uganda's carbon regulations and policies which may hinder their operation within the country? If any, what could they be?
Oh, I'll try to answer that last one. Once the regulation comes out, I believe it will recognize particular independent standards or carbon crediting programs that should be able to operate within Uganda's vicinity. So that could give some gold standards, more market compared to others.
Thank you, Lisa. If I may attempt to support in responding to that, when regulations come in place and maybe start operation of Article 6, all carbon projects in the country have to be registered. And then there is a process of authorization that a country undertakes. So before credits are sold to any market, whether local or international, then government will be aware or will need to have authorized them. As Lisa put it, the Uganda's carbon market regulations are going to clarify on how these are going to be done. We pray that indeed these regulations come out soon to put our carbon market on track and clear to everyone. There is no doubt the carbon market as is now in Uganda is quite ambiguous. Many players can I say frustrated. Their actions are limited, but the government, as Lisa put it, is not seated. The regulations are yet to be out for our all use. Then someone named Action Entrepreneurs is saying, I am a co-driver of the Zero Carbon Africa project, but I have not yet seen Uganda initiating carbon trading guidelines. Other countries are starting to get on course. How do we cope up? I think this has been answered. As Lisa put, that our regulations have been gazetted, but are waiting for endorsement of the minister. That is the Minister of Water and Environment. As she put it, anytime soon he should be endorsing them, and they should be on available for us to use. And I think once they're out, we shall be ahead of those other countries that are just starting to get on course or starting on theirs. So I want to confidently say we are not left behind. Progress is being made. Atwile Owen asks that Afolu having the highest potential, how can Afolu projects attract long-term investors given I think this means risks associated with the land use change or tenure risks in Uganda? I think it is in the third or fourth session of this learning series. We have invited guests from Nature Conservancy, American global-based organization that is going to take us through the potential and challenges and possible remedies of carbon projects. I feel this question is going to better be answered then. So I hope Owen is part of the learning series participants, but in case you are not, contact us after registering, then I will get you to attend that session where we will be taken through global carbon market opportunities, challenges, and possible remedies and criticisms that they are faced with from a global perspective. I feel this would be more satisfying than just having a Ugandan response. Then someone is saying, looking at the fact that some of the requirements the country needs to develop carbon markets are still work in progress, what does that mean for a carbon developer? Oh, I'm missing carbon developer who is interested in developing carbon projects, especially exploring compliance carbon markets. Lisa, would you want to answer to that? Should I read it for you?
Oh, yes, Nelson, please, can you read it to me again?
Someone is asking, this is Posiano, is saying that looking at the fact that some of the requirements the country needs to develop carbon markets are still work in progress. What does it mean for a carbon project developer who is interested in developing carbon projects, especially exploring compliance carbon markets?
So I must say some of these things are still a work in progress, but once the regulations come out, it's going to spearhead and fast track movement because you realize things like the national registry, we may not have one in place, but there's room for us to use an international one. So project proponents should not be in fear because things will move as long as the regulations are placed outside.
Thank you, Lisa. Then Frederick is wondering whether there is a technology, accredited monitoring, reporting, and verification for Uganda to bring about transparency in reporting carbon projects, carbon project removals on carbon market.
So currently we have our national monitoring, reporting, and verification system where we have currently operationalized a few sectors. Let me say agriculture. We are still in position, in the process of operationalizing all the other sectors. But I know as we proceed and enter this carbon markets on a learning by doing basis, we shall advocate for better systems to do carbon accounting.
Thank you, Lisa. Then Henry David Bayer is asking that how is the institutional arrangements and stakeholder coordination done in Uganda? regarding carbon markets. He further asks that how is the private sector engaged in Uganda?
So I will start with when the carbon market regulations first took force. What the Ministry of Water and Environment first did was to come up with a national carbon market task force. And within this task force, it involved members from a wide range of ministries, departments, and agencies, people from academia, NGOs, and civil society. So I must say, from the onset of these regulations, government has been working closely with private sector to fully get input on how these carbon market regulations are going to be at the end of the day. So government is working closely hand in hand with private sector.
Thank you, Lisa. If I may add something to better explain that, when we talk of the institutional arrangement in Uganda, we have been talking about the Ministry of Water and Environment and Climate Change Department. This department in Uganda is the one responsible for overseeing, supporting, and coordinating all climate actions, including carbon trade or carbon project development, registration, monitoring, and ABCD, all around that. And as Elisa put it, private sector players are engaged on a daily, can I say on a daily basis or on regular? For example, during the development of the regulations that we are talking about, there was wide consultation with the private sector. A number of conferences and validation meetings were done to have the input of private sector and all other players in the carbon market to have their input captured. So, in summary, the carbon market and climate action in Uganda is coordinated by Climate Change Department and the Ministry of Water and Environment, and stakeholders, including private sector, are engaged on a regular, and they are free to, as Elisa, in her last slide, he presented the contacts that could be reached out to in case of any question regarding carbon markets and everything around it, that you can get guided. So carbon market in Uganda is not an isolated or hidden market. It is open to every stakeholder. Bernadette Natukwasa is asking that based on Uganda, may you please guide on the steps for PP? I guess this is a project to register the project activities and possible impacts if the regulations are out and a PP has not registered their, I think PP is project proponent. Wow, we have Gen Zs in the carbon market with acronyms. So that what are the likely impacts if the regulations are out and the project proponent has not registered their activities?
Oh, Nelson, are you bouncing that back at me?
Yes, please.
Oh, yes. Once the regulations take force, the regulations are going to come out with guidelines accompanying them, and all carbon market projects that are operating in the country right now will be given, of course, a time period to say we are here, we are around, we are also operating in the country. And for those who may not comply within that time period, it will mean you're going against the country's regulation, or let me put it in a way and say, you get bottlenecks when you're trying to sell your carbon credits. Or let me say in this case, asking for a verifier, because the regulations will first require even that verifier to first come and register in the country. So failure to comply with the regulations will give your project bottlenecks and overall failure.
Thank you, Lisa, for clarifying on that. I think before I read any other question, let me invite David. David's hand has been up for longer time. It must be paining him by now. Please, David, have the floor and put your question to, you should put it to Lisa, not me. Please. Davis, the floor is yours. Please put your question. I guess.
Thanks very much, Mr. Nelson, for moderating this session very well. That first I was not able to unmute and talk, but fortunately, you have been able to allow. I want to appreciate Madam Lisa for the wonderful presentation about the carbon markets and all the other she has been able to point out. Really, it has been an interesting presentation, and as a person, I have been able to benefit a lot. My name is Mwesigwa Davis, basically a master's student from Makerere University, doing masters in land use and regional development planning. Madam Lisa, I have few questions, and I would like you to clarify on them, so that I can again have a much gist on them. One is you have talked about of Paris Agreement of 2015, and I know it has different articles. How far have the government of Uganda, for example, been effective in implementing them? Because it has many articles, and is Uganda these articles fully effected, or somehow we might be lagging behind over these Paris Agreement articles? Another thing is, I understand that this issue of climate change come up with different distractions, with disastrous effects. As the Ministry of Water and Environment, have you tried to put some warning mechanisms or warning systems in place, for example, in areas of Eastern Uganda, in Ududa, Manafa, Sironko, Mbale? Because of recent, we had Mbale being hit by floods. So have you tried to put some warning systems in those places that maybe people are aware or they are in the know of what might come, maybe whenever they see these signs? Then as a ministry, I understand you have heavy work to work, or you have heavy work to fulfill as a ministry. What could be the challenges that you have faced in implementing this activity of dealing with basically carbon markets, but also climate change as an aspect in there? Then I understand that you are doing a tremendous job, but this one might be on relying so much on maybe a few class of people. As the ministry, have you tried to do some mass campaigns or massive campaigns, maybe in local areas, so that people can also be able to know this issue of carbon market and maybe the challenges of climate change? Have you tried to carry out some massive campaigns in local areas? For example, is a person maybe in my district, Chitagona district, aware of the issue of carbon markets and maybe the climate change? Have you tried to sensitize people over these issues? Then lastly, at the ministry again, because you carry the emblem of each and everything concerning climate, have you tried to put some strategies, or which strategies have you been able to put in place in order to reduce on carbon emissions in Uganda? I understand carbon market is looking at buying carbon, but have you tried to put in strategies to reduce on carbon emissions in Uganda? Otherwise, really I'm interested, and I appreciate my Melissa and Mr. Nelson for organizing this. Otherwise, may God bless you, and I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davis. Interestingly, I was calling David Mwesigwa, and Davis Mwesigwa took up the floor, but that has no far-reaching problems. So, David, I'm going to give you a floor soon after we have responded to Davis's questions. I would like to save Lisa from some of these questions, and I reserve her to respond to David's questions. Davis is wondering whether the government has undertaken any or has deliberately put in place efforts to reduce on carbon emissions, not to concentrate instead on selling the carbon credits. Sure, the government is undertaking a number of interventions. If I may give an example of RED Plus activities or RED Plus program, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, focus, and also that is conserving also the carbon stocks and also enhancing the carbon stocks. A program that focuses on developing countries. Uganda has almost everything in place to undertake this program. It's already ongoing, and a number of players have been engaged, or stakeholders, I would say, that have been engaged. And actually, when RED Plus started, the emission reductions of 2017 and 18 actually there is a proposal that has been developed to sell them. So while the country undertakes emission reduction interventions, at the end of the day, the emission reductions can also be converted into credits that the government can earn from. So the government is undertaking programs to reduce the carbon emissions. About the bottlenecks that are limiting emission reduction, one thing that I think we all appreciate is that we are a developing country, and what that literally means is our financial muscle is quite small. So bottlenecks are there. And being a developing country, it does not limit only on finances, but also the technical capacity, the technology that is required, the expertise. But all this is something that is known, and efforts are in place to have them addressed. You must have read in news or anywhere that Uganda actively participates in a conference of parties of UNFCCC. And during these meetings, the government is there to negotiate and lobby for Uganda to better position the country to build its resilience. When I talk building the resilience of the country, I mean the communities that are very vulnerable to climate change impacts. Your other question was about early warning systems in climate change impact-prone areas. You know, it's quite interesting on whether, for example, landslide in Bududa should be attributed to climate change or any other factors. But having said that, I'm not responding that in the respect of carbon market or climate action, but as far as I know, early warning systems were put there in Mbale sub-region, actually Mount Elgon and Bududa site. An interesting story is that these early warning systems, they used to make alarms. So whenever there could be a threat, they could make an alarm. And in one way or the other, they convenienced one of the community members. The warning disturbed their sleep. So they used to go there and unplug and disconnect them so that they can enjoy their sleep, so that they don't make noise. So whereas the government is undertaking interventions to have early warning systems in place, the communities, I would say they are hesitant to adopt and integrate these early warning systems into their everyday work. So it is indeed the responsibility of each one of us, including the government, the private sector, the academia, and international and development partners to ensure that resilience of our communities is built. Then Davis further asked that have there been awareness creation campaigns that have been made on carbon market related issues in mostly rural communities. I want to say that carbon market, as they are now, it is an area that is not understood by many. And this is not limited to Uganda. In July 2024, I attended the first Africa's Carbon Market Stakeholders Conference in Addis. Lisa, I attended it with Irene, representing Uganda.
Oh.
One of the identified areas was the limited knowledge of African community. Lulo or the wananchi, the academia, the policymakers, there is limited understanding. And one of the recommendation was peer-to-peer learning of professionals and academia. And that recommendation actually is the reason why this learning series has been organized, so that Davis and I and Lisa and Owen and other colleagues can come together and share and learn, get to better understand carbon market and related stuff, to better position Uganda and Africa to participate in the carbon market landscape. There is no doubt that carbon market presents a great opportunity for Uganda and Africa to move toward sustainable development. But one thing we need to be conscious about is that the trade in carbon should not be looked at as a substitute for other socio-economic undertakings that have been happening in Africa. Carbon markets, or Uganda or Africa participating in carbon markets, should not be seen as a breakthrough for socio-economic transformation, but it presents an opportunity to tap into resources to add on the already ongoing efforts. So while farmers earn from trading or selling their carbon credits, it should be emphasized that it hardly would be possible for a farmer to rely on carbon credit sale as source of livelihood. It is an incentive, it is an additional income. The baseline behind carbon market is that it is a financial incentive to incentivize communities to participate in climate change crisis mitigation, combating the climate change crisis. So you say participating, for example, in tree planting, you should not look at it entirely to sell carbon credit and get money, but it is your individual role to contribute to the global efforts to mitigate climate change. So let no person think that the money earned from trade in carbon will be their socio-economic breakthrough or will be a complete source of livelihood. It is an incentive. I think by that I've attempted to answer most, if not all, Davis's questions. Allow me now, David. David, you have your hand up. Please unmute and put your question. I think we have about 5 or 7 minutes to close this and allow Elisa to go and rest.
Thank you so much, Nelson and Lisa. Thank you for your time that you have sacrificed for this. I will just ask 3 questions. One is about reporting. When a country is reporting NDCs, do they include both voluntary reductions and maybe also from compliance? Do they include both voluntary and compliance? Then number 2, are we looking at carbon markets as maybe a way of bringing in money from foreign countries? Is it also possible to have local entities? For example, let's say MTN or banks also participating in this in a way maybe of reducing their emissions as well. Is there any kind of system for local companies to participate in this? And maybe the third will be hopefully not preempting regulations, but will the ministry also add another layer of verification of maybe carbon projects within? Will they do monitoring to go and check and find out, is this project really doing exactly what it's claiming to do? Those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the patience. We really kept your hand up. We apologize for that. Lisa, would you like to respond to David's questions?
Oh, yes. I'll go right ahead. Thank you, David, for those good questions. So you asked about when countries or like when Uganda is reporting NDC, do we report voluntary and compliance? But I want to tell you, NDC is totally different from voluntary and compliance. A nationally determined contribution specifically represents a country's national climate change action plan. And in that action plan, it will cover 2 components. Firstly, the mitigation component. Under the mitigation component, it will entail our emission reduction target as a country from specific greenhouse gas high emitting sectors like agriculture, forestry, land use, waste, industry. And then the adaptation component in our action plan will entail very many other sectors of the economy that are vulnerable. Now, how are we going to do voluntary and compliance market reporting? This reporting will be covered in a country's national registry. As I was explaining, under the compliance market, for example, Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, if Uganda enters a bilateral cooperation with Sweden, Uganda will be required at the end of the day to transfer what we call internationally transferable mitigation outcomes to Sweden. And that under the voluntary, under Article 6.2 will be recorded in our country's national registry. So yes, those are the 2 differences between an NDC and the national registry. So you asked if carbon markets are only going to be international. No, we are not only looking for cooperation from international people. As I said earlier, a project proponent could be an individual, a business entity, a country, government, any participant who wishes to participate in this carbon market. The market will be an open market. Then you kind of hinted, will the government be monitoring these projects once in a while? Yes, I believe so. I believe so. Most importantly, for a project, let's say under Article 6.2, if for example Sweden is really investing, funding a renewable energy project, let's say in Uganda, we should be able to go and monitor to ensure that these emission reductions are truly verifiable and they have high integrity before we do carbon accounting on our national registry on our side. So I believe monitoring of projects will be there. I hope I've tried to answer all the questions. I believe so, Nelson. I don't think I've left anything out.
Lisa, thank you very much. Indeed, you have, to me, you have answered all those questions. Carbon markets is an interesting area. My prayer is that this discussion ignites our curiosity to read more and consult more about these carbon markets. And Lisa has provided her contact in the chat box that she would be happy to make any other clarifications that if any one of us has questions. Chikome Kodisan has asked Nelson, as you have indicated that the emissions reduction from Red Plus have already been recorded under Uganda. How then do we sell these credits and prevent the pitfall of double counting? This is quite preempting. We have a session that is going to look at Red Plus and Article 6 mechanism. I encourage DISAN to check on our schedule and ensure they attend this session that will be discussing that. Before we go, Frederick asks that what happens if the regulations to come out states it that the government should be the only one to sell and manage credits on the carbon market rather than private companies that can sell their carbon removals to interested parties. What state can this render the private companies selling global? Now, Frederick, I don't know whether we should discuss the regulations that are not out yet. It would be better if they are released today, then tomorrow we would happily discuss them. But now, you see, we would be discussing the possibilities, which may make us less of professional.
I'm sorry to interject still, but as you hear, voluntary carbon market, there is still room for a free market. And in terms of business, any state cannot fully enclose of business for themselves. So do not fear.
Thank you, Lisa, for putting that. Irene was asking that kindly throw more light on the role of Red Plus in the carbon market institutional arrangement. I wish we could have more time to discuss this further. I noticed that Irene is not among the, can I say, the participants of the learning series, but on that day when we'll be looking at Red Plus and Article 6 mechanism, I will ensure that Irene is added. Irene, I'm going to share with you our schedule to ensure that on that day you do not miss out on how Red Plus plays a role in institutional arrangement of carbon markets in Uganda. Amena was saying, I will get the questions to my answers after presentation on the project. Yes, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen and others, wow. David was asking, does NDC include both VCM and compliance? Anena, would you love to respond to that in 1 minute and we conclude this?
Oh, as I answered to David, an NDC totally different from when you say voluntary and compliance. The information for voluntary and compliance market will be recorded in what we call our national registry when we start carbon market operation in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Lillian is asking, there are other participants that want to participate in this learning series. Is there an opportunity for them to join? Lillian, let us discuss this off here. For sessions that are of public interest, we freely share the link to the public to participate in the series. But for sessions that are so technical that target developers and private players, we intend to limit to only people that were selected. But Lillian, let's discuss this further when we get off here. Ladies and gentlemen and others, allow me thank each one of you for making it to today's session. It's your participation is a testament to the efforts that we all share to see climate change addressed. I thank our partners of Mandela Climate Resilience Institute that are supporting us to ensure this happens. I want to thank Lisa, Marion for making it to today's session. We are so grateful and more so availing your contact for further consultations. I want to thank you and call upon the fellows of this learning series to share their questions on our WhatsApp forum. We shall always attempt to answer your questions. From us to you, see you soon. God bless you, and may you live to see a climate change crisis-free world. Thank you very much. See you soon.